and welcome to Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction. I'm not your host, Dean Anderson, today, and to explain that in a little more detail, we've made a special term of events today on our show, and what we're going to do is we're going to have someone else interview me for a change. So my colleague and my friend and my coworker and fellow addiction counselor, Sarah Montez, is going to take the wheel from here.
Thank you, Dean.
You're welcome.
I'm so excited to be on this side of things and to be able to ask you some questions. I know you have super valuable information and experiences and wisdom to be able to share with people around addiction and recovery. So today, and Dean, you are the executive director of Epic Recovery here in London.
Correct.
Awesome. And Epic Recovery is doing something really cool. Can you tell us what this is and a little bit about it?
I can, and first I want to thank you for that awesome introduction, and just want to let everybody at home know she wasn't paid to do that as a volunteer.
No, I wasn't.
As a volunteer's place, right?
True.
Epic Recovery, over the years, Epic Recovery is fairly new. It's only been around for a couple of years, but over the years and working in the industry, I've recognized that there's a large gap in services when it comes to social engagement. Mm-hmm. And there are, social committees, and there are events that happen within, the 12-step world and AA, and there's some events that happen as part of recovery addiction services and CMHA. But there's nothing truly inclusive that includes people that are sober curious and maybe practicing harm reduction or in different camps of the 12-step world. Mm-hmm. So people that don't understand that, there's a little bit of a separation between people in Narcotics Anonymous versus Alcoholics Anonymous. And we've noticed that there's this big gap. So what Epic Recovery is trying to do, or not trying to do, what we are doing is we've created SOCON, which is the Sober Connection, the Sober Connection Convention, actually, to give it a little more spin. And what's happening this is just one part of a greater thing, but what's happening is on September 16th here in London, down on Dundas Place in front of the courthouse, we're renting the street off, and we're going to block that street off, and we're going to have sober-friendly vendors, and we're going to have business partners, and we're going to have people from the community. We're going to have some mental health and addiction, but this isn't a mental health and addiction thing. It's more about a social connection thing. We're going to have representatives from the local colleges and universities come down, and we're going to show people what it means to have fun and be engaged in an environment that doesn't require drugs and alcohol, because we can note not just from the recovery lens, but from a lived experience lens, that every day, more and more, every single thing that we're doing in the community is being drawn back to drugs and alcohol. There's mm-hmm. more billboards, there's more cannabis shops, there's more alcohol. I mean, I went to the movies with my son, 2 weeks ago, mm-hmm. And they sell beer there. There's beer mm-hmm. for sale behind the movie counter. So it used to be popcorn. So now, and you can get it delivered to your door as well. So we're seeing this larger focus on substance use, and we're saying, hey, there's a large percentage of the population that don't fall into that category, mm-hmm. not just recovery people, but people that just choose to not consume. And the stats are about 65% of middle-aged men and women drink less than one drink a week, mm-hmm. Or one drug a week. My earpiece is coming loose. Drink more, less than one drug or drink in a week, and so there's a major need for those services that provide sober-friendly and substance-free. So, in my quick answer.
Very quick, thank you. So I hear you saying that there has been kind of some division or even barriers for people to have that social connection. Why, in recovery, or even people who choose not to use substances recreationally, is that important? Why is that social connection so important?
Well, it's important for everyone, and I think the big thing, the quickest way to contrast that is to say, do you remember that pandemic we just had? And all of the isolation and all of the separation and all the disconnection, it exacerbated mental health. It made things worse. It made people not feel inclusive. Even from, our ancestry, and looking at, as we, if you believe in evolution, as we evolved as people, the connection is what helped us survive. It's what keeps us alive. There's a fundamental part of our brain that says, I need to be socially connected or I'm going to be isolated and separated and I'm going to end up starving or freezing and dying somewhere on a frozen pond or eaten by a tiger. So that it's a major component to basic human needs. And when we recognize that we continue to push society in this, the only way to be social. In my work as an addiction counselor, I hear all the time, I don't know how I'm going to be social. I don't know how I'm going to go out and be there. And a lot of my work is actually helping people with social anxiety and trying to figure out how to move forward because they don't know how to do it without it. And we're creating that culture more and more every single day. And if we don't get that connection, people aren't going to feel safe. They're not going to feel part of. They're not going to be able to, the mental health and those exasperations are going to get worse and worse.
Right. So it's a fundamental human need is what I'm hearing, that we all need that connection.
Yeah, so in part of the addiction counseling piece that we do is we look at it from a biopsychosocial spiritual lens, so this all-encompassing, say, what are all the components of a substance use disorder, and then how do we fulfill those needs for that substance use disorder in all of those aspects, so physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially. And in today's society, the social piece tends to be falling off more and more and more because we're going to online social, we're going to connecting in digital ways. There's not so much of that connection. And we can easily see, and if anyone has any understanding of the 12-step world, the original 12-step groups were formed because two gentlemen got together and decided to have a conversation about their alcoholism, and it provided a valuable asset for them to recognize that connection helped them both to stay sober, which is the cornerstone of AA, which has been around for 90 years. So it's the cornerstone of it is connection. I mean, it's so super important, and the people in the 12-step world recognize that and participate in it. But unfortunately, the 12-step world only has a really, really small amount of people that participate in it. And the 12-step world is not for people that are just sober living or sober curious. It's only for people that have an active addiction. So they're getting the benefits of this social stuff, but all these other people are not, and not being able to connect in that way.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So if I wanted to participate in this event that's coming up in September, whether as a business owner, a service provider, or just as a person wanting to check it out, what do I do?
You give me a call.
That was easy.
I'm going to put my digits on the bottom.
Okay.
We have, so epicrecovery.ca, you can access information there right now in the process. So that's a great segue, actually. The process of getting people involved with being vendors or participating in this group, the secondary impact to that is we're in the process of creating a website called thesoberconnection.ca, which is under construction and should be open soon, hopefully by the time this airs, maybe if we're lucky. So when the soberconnection.ca, which I know the producer Shane is so awesome, he's going to make it scroll across the bottom of the screen here for us, is going to not only be an access for people to participate in the September 16th event, is what we want to do is we want to create a listing of sober-friendly, sober, dry restaurants that aren't licensed, that sort of thing, special events, activities that people can access on the website that we have then collected and put into one spot where anybody who's sober curious can just go to the website and say, hey, what do I want to do this weekend? And it's like, oh, I'm going to go to a paint night, and I know that it's a sober-friendly paint night because the Sober Connection has already vetted them or looked at that as a viable option for whatever it may be. So whatever that activity might be, whether it's sober softball or hockey night or whatever it might be, we're hoping to get it so that we can create that collaboration for information for people to share.
Wow, that's an amazing resource.
Yeah.
So if I'm a business owner, does that mean I have to stop selling alcohol or participating in alcohol at all?
Duh.
Excellent, thank you.
And that's that.
Perfect.
No. We recognize, so for instance, I brought up the movie theater. You know, they sell alcohol. It's not a high-risk environment. They're not selling it. They're not pushing it on people. So that could be, maybe a low-risk environment that somebody could still attend and go to and participate in. And we're in the process of working to create a way to view that in a healthier way. So there would be places listed on the website that would be low risk, but still not zero risk for places that might have
I
it.
see.
So for instance, the Palisade here in London, they've got great activities. And I went there last week and I went bowling. And there was nobody there trying to push booze on me. There was nobody trying to sell anything to me. If I wanted alcohol, I could walk to the bar and buy one and bring it back to my seat. But it wasn't this force. Same with at the billiard tables. Nobody's coming to push a drink on you. A server will come and ask you if you want a coffee or water or whatever, but they're not forcing alcohol. So that would be, a moderate risk. But at the same time, the billiards, the video games, the bowling, the connection, the people, the food. What a great service that they provide to the community. So we're hoping to find a gradient of services that are available for people. And then if you are, in early recovery from addiction, you could maybe use that resource as saying, you know what, I'll go there during the daytime, or maybe I'll go there when I'm at low risk of a relapse. I'm not going to go there at 12 o'clock on a Friday night when I'm upset and angry and at a high risk of relapse and hope I don't buy a drink. So we're looking at those options now and weighing that out.
So helping people to assess the risk, providing them with that information of where are some sober friendly, some sober curious places that I can go that are of little or no risk, moderate risk, helping people assess that. That sounds amazing. So you talked about the sober connection, maybe as a community, not just an event, collaboration. Is there anything else that we should know about this sober connection? Is it this event or is there more?
More. Yeah. So in doing that, we're hoping to actually create some sober events in our own right to do some activities. So in June, we're hoping to do a sober nightclub where we're going to take over an existing bar. That existing bar, we've already got it lined up, but we're not going to release that information on the show right now. But we've got a local bar that has so graciously decided to turn off the taps, cover up their beer signs, shut everything down to host a private party just for us to come in for all of the people that just want a substance-free night to go dancing, and we're going to get a DJ and we're going to have that, same nightclub experience that somebody would have, but no worries or concerns about having to have somebody drool on you or, right?
What nightclubs are you going to? People are drooling on you.
The good ones.
Yeah, apparently.
Right?
That's amazing.
So that process is hopefully, and what we're going towards is not only working with existing vendors to see how we can collaborate and connect people, but what are the events that we can do as the Sober Connection to provide some one-off special events that people could attend. Maybe it's a live band, or maybe it's a comedy show, or maybe things that we can do where we have a bunch of people, collectively getting together. And then in doing so, creating a social network as an underpinning for people to be able to be like, hey, I met new friends and I engage with new people, and I can find out that there's other people that are having a lifestyle the same as me.
Beautiful. So this isn't about replacing or changing people's recovery practices. This is about augmenting and adding to their social connection. That's what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's so much more to it. And it's not about pushing abstinence on people. And I think that there's another layer to that would be recognizing that we're living in a society that has a much larger advocacy for healthy living, and the healthy guidelines for alcohol consumption came out, and it says don't drink more than 2 drinks a week because of the harms that it can cause to yourself. So seeing a lot more youth, a lot more students. I've talked to friends that are university professors, and they say most of the kids don't drink now because they recognize the harms and the problem as the newer generation is coming up. And we've got a really good opportunity to start these things now, to set some seeds, to build something that could be a network of substance-free living, because the rest of society is going more substances, and we need to find our little niche there and be able to bring up kids in a space that they can grow and say, hey, I'm going to a nightclub and I don't have to drink.
Wow, that's really cool, because I know for somebody in recovery, that's a part of my life that I really enjoy and that's missing. I really do enjoy having that social engagement and doing those fun things. And I've even had conversations with people recently that now that I'm sober, I don't know what to do for fun. So this is a beautiful opportunity for that. Is there anything else about Sober Connection that we should know today and where can we get more? You talked about your website a little bit.
Yep, that's it. Just go to the website. You can reach out to me. You can find me online, and we're looking to just connect as much as possible to anyone that's interested. This is not an addiction recovery movement. It is the idea of saying anyone that wants to have sober living, please participate in some way.
So, Dean, I want to thank you for what you've shared. We're just going to take a moment and have a break, and then we'll come back and hear a little more. Welcome back to Invisible. I'm your host today, Sarah Montez, and I'm here with Dean Anderson. Before the break, Dean, you were telling us about SOCON. I'd like to ask you a couple of personal questions, if you're okay with that.
Oh, please. please do.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your recovery journey that led to the conception of SOCON. Why is it so important to you?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm really open about my own recovery, and I recover out loud, so to speak. So I like to talk about it in a sense of it being able to help other people in their journey. And that's a really important question. And the reason being is that I went into abstinence-based recovery 20 years ago.
Okay.
And 20 years ago, I was sober for 6 years. In that 6 years' time, I didn't know that there was more to it. I didn't recognize that there was things that I needed to do in order to maintain a healthy lifestyle, that there was a mental health underlying condition, that there was that biopsychosocial piece that we talked about, the spiritual piece. I didn't know any of that. So in society's mind's eye, or my mind's eye from what society looked at, was you just practice abstinence, you just get sober, and then you just go do what you're supposed to do. Work, have kids, pay your bills, all that stuff. In that 6 years' time, I isolated. I didn't participate in any of the social events. I got invited to parties and I just made up an excuse why I couldn't go or wasn't going to go. I created boundaries and barriers within myself that made it so that I didn't have any type of social inclusion. The only outlet for interaction with other people was my wife and children. Who's my ex-wife now, and that's why, because it was part of that focus was always being with the family, but not having a social outlet outside of that, or being connected in a stronger way to a larger community as a whole. So everything was focused on work. So I'm not going to say that that's the main problem, but it was a really big part of it. So then when I ended up relapsing, and then I ended up going out drinking again for a few years, then I ended up going back into residential treatment.
Okay.
When I went into residential treatment, I was introduced to the idea that it's all encompassing. It's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, all of these other things that incorporate that. And that was the catalyst that got me to do what I do now. Now, as I'm continuing to grow and evolve as a counselor over the years, the more I look back, the more I recognize that there is this massive gap with people. And like I said earlier, the huge part of my work every day is just trying to get people to understand that there are ways to be social and to be engaged and to feel connected and feel part of something bigger without having drugs and alcohol, and I didn't know that. So when I got into the early stages of recovery, I was an alumni at Westover Treatment Center here in Thamesville, and I started doing stuff with the alumni, and I noticed this huge sense of belonging that came when we had our activities. So we did Super Bowl parties, and we did bowling nights, and I organized, rented Boulder Mountain and did, tubing and all this other things that we've done in that time. And while we were doing all that stuff, I never felt so connected to my life and safe and belonging and participatory in that space. Over time, those activities started to fade off and different things came into life. But then when you look now, what's available? What are the things that people get to do as a whole that have that sense of belonging or that group activity? And there's not, unless you, like I said, unless you participate in the 12-step world where they have a lot of those things, which is wonderful. But outside of that, there's not much. And some of the 12-step world stuff is beautiful and amazing, but it's still, they'll have a a dance, an AA dance, and it's in a church basement, and there's a baked goods sales table and stuff like that, and it doesn't have that same sense of I belong as part of society. It's still this segregated sitting at the children's table kind of social event where you're not really participating in, and I see a huge opportunity for us to break down that wall and to smash down those barriers. And as part of my own recovery, my own lived experience, I see the value in that, and I think it's unparalleled, and I think we really need to just hit it home. Right?
Wow.
So there is a personal little, and not to mention the fact that normally I'm sitting in your seat as a host of a show about stigma, and that's massive. The reason that kept me sitting in my basement at home for 6 years while I was sober was the worry about the stigma and the shame if I had to turn down a drink or say no to somebody or be put in a situation where I wouldn't be able to handle not being able to drink. And the stigma that came along with that, or having to say to somebody, no, I don't drink because I had a problem before, was so massive that the shame kept me stuck in my own mental health and kept me stuck in the basement. And I think that in order for us to make massive change in the world, we need to smash that stigma down and that barrier down to allow people to just be, I just don't drink.
Right.
There's a meme that's going around, and I've seen it for years, but it really sticks in my head. And the meme on social media is, alcohol is the only drug that you need to explain to people why you're not using it. And every other drug is like, why are you doing that? And alcohol is like, how come you're not doing that?
It's true.
Right.
Yeah. It can put people in a really uncomfortable situation in order to say that. So you talked a little bit about shame, and I know in our work together and work with clients, we talk about that in this idea of emotions. How do you connect that social piece and emotions as you're working with clients?
I loop all of my work into this guiding principle, and I've said it on the show before. We're emotional people that don't like emotions. The cornerstone of addiction recovery is coping, right? And it's this idea of not being able to regulate or feel comfortable in my own skin. And you'll hear it all the time with people in addiction. I don't feel comfortable in my own skin. I don't know who I am, and I feel more connected to myself when I'm high or on drugs or whatever. So the focal point with most of my clients is to be able to learn coping and understand that. And a major part of that coping is to be able to have self-esteem and self-worth and value and belonging and all of those things that go along with that, because then those unwanted emotions, they're not as unwanted anymore. We learn how to coexist with them, so to speak. As we become more confident and more self-assured. So when I feel good about myself and I have some sadness, I usually feel better about that. So I just like, it's sadness, it's okay. I'm all right, I know that I'm okay, right? If I'm trying to avoid it and run away from it or hide from it, then I'm going to make it bigger. It's going to become more problematic in the process of the avoidance of it. So the long answer to your short question is, when I get to participate and I get to go find something that provides purpose or direction or gives me something to focus on, I feel connected. I feel part of. I feel self-esteem. I feel self-worth. I recognize that I am part of something bigger, opposed to the person sitting in the basement and their ego kicks in and says, I'm separated, I'm different, I'm not good enough, I don't belong. And I'm sure that every single person has experienced this, where you walk into a group of people and all of a sudden somebody knows your name and someone says hi and someone gives you a hug and and all of a sudden you feel 10 foot tall and bulletproof because you belong, right? And from an emotional perspective, that means everything to a lot of people. And there's a lot of people out there that don't get to experience that because of their substance use or because they have been trained by society that their substance use is the only way to feel that way.
Right. So you told us how you had this 6 years of sobriety, and as in part, the lack of social connection led to your relapse. So now that you're re-engaged for many years in your personal recovery and living an abstinence life, in what ways do you connect socially to others, to society, to people who are either abstinent, to people who are sober curious? How do you do that as an individual?
A multitude of ways. Again, in the social aspect of things, from social media during the pandemic was a major part of it. I hate to admit it, but you kind of didn't have a choice, right? Another part of it is, to be honest, there is a part that's missing, and the part that's missing is why I'm here. Excellent. Okay, so I see it. Our relationship, working in the addiction field. I try to network and collaborate with other people that understand and get it. I attend some 12-step meetings. I try to find connection where I can, but it's still, there's a part that's missing, and there's still something. So in my personal life, I was doing improv comedy for the last 8 years. That was a major part of my social connection, and it was a substance-free activity that I did on a regular basis that provided a whole bunch of other things. We could do a whole different show on that. Provided a bunch of other things, but I also was given the gift of being able to educate people on the connection of improv and how that helped with mental health and well-being. So that was really important to me for my thing. So yeah, that's that.
What a beautiful gift. In closing, very quickly, is there any final thoughts that you want to share with our viewers about your own personal recovery or SOCON that we spoke about, just very briefly?
So there's my own personal journey was there was a major focal point growing up, and I recall the value of having people around and what it meant for having like abandonment type wounds, okay, and not feeling like you belonged or being bullied or teased in school and that sort of thing, and that social connection didn't exist the way it should have when I was younger. And I see that, and we talk about peer pressure, and I think we whitewash it and we kind of, blow it up as just, stay away from the troublesome kids and you won't have to fall into peer pressure. But that's not what it really is. It's more about trying to find a sense of belonging and fitting in, and then when you don't fit in with the people that are cool or healthy or whatever it is, you find whoever it is that you can fit in with, and then that's when you go and force a round peg into a square hole, and then it turns into a social aspect of unbelonging, and then trying to force yourself to be somewhere that you shouldn't be, and that created a massive amount of disconnect. So the very first time I picked up a drink, it was like, oh, I fit in, I belong. I'm at a party and I'm numb and I'm okay with that, right? So that idea of that social connection and what it looks like from aging and growing up, I think that's something that we need to really point at and really teach our youth of today that's it's not about peer pressure, it's about finding a sense of belonging for yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I can see very clearly where this passion for the sober connection and SOCON has come from.
Yeah.
I really want to thank you so much for sharing your personal and professional life and perspective with us today, and for letting me sit in your hosting seat.
Oh, it's a comfy chair.
It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Okay. Thank you for tuning in to Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction. We'll see you next time.